Transporting propane is serious business. As a transport operator, you have an important job, and it's critical to the safety and security of the propane transportation process that you know and understand what's required to get the job done right. You come into contact with a variety of flammable and combustible liquids that require careful handling. In this module, we'll take a look at some of the hazardous chemicals you might encounter and some of the safety practices you should follow when handling them. Besides propane, you may handle methanol, ethyl mercaptan, diesel fuel or gasoline, diesel exhaust fluid, and other solvents. Because all of these materials are hazardous, you need to follow precautions and the proper procedures to ensure safe handling. It's important that you get the training necessary to do your job and do it right.
As far as emergency shutdown systems on the trailer, if you use them constantly, they'll work. If things do start going haywire, if a seal blows, a hose can break, there's so many things that can happen without any notice at all. It just, when you're working with high pressure and working with this stuff, it's going to happen at some point in time. You always want to make sure you give yourself a way out. Probably one of the biggest things is knowing which way the breeze is blowing. Just simple little things like that. Just being aware of what's around you, what's there. If something does start going wrong, which way is it going to go? So you know which way to go yourself. There's nothing worse than getting caught in the middle of a situation you don't know where to go.
Let's take a look at some of the hazardous materials you might encounter in the course of your job. We learned about the physical properties of propane earlier. We'll now look at other hazardous chemicals. Methanol is a chemical used to prevent freezing in lines, regulators, and valves. Methanol displaces moisture and keeps it from gathering together, which can cause ice blockage. Occasionally, you may need to work with methanol. Methanol is poisonous and should never come in contact with your skin, eyes, or mouth. It can be fatal if swallowed or cause blindness if it gets in your eyes. Always wear appropriate personal protective equipment, or PPE, whenever you handle, pour, or transfer methanol from one container to another. Methanol is highly flammable. When poured into a small container for use, the container must be approved for flammable liquids and equipped with a self-closing and sealing spout. Methanol fires are difficult to see. Methanol usually does not produce a visible flame or smoke when it burns. Methanol vapors in confined spaces are hazardous. Breathing methanol that is soaked into clothing or spilled in a warm, tightly closed vehicle cab can make you drowsy or, in high concentration, unconscious. If you use methanol, be sure it is outside or in a well-ventilated area. Methanol is an aggressive solvent. It can easily remove paint from finished surfaces and dissolve seals and gaskets. Therefore, methanol should be used sparingly and only when required. A methanol container should never be filled to 100%. Allow room for the liquids or vapors to expand. Another hazardous material you may encounter is ethyl mercaptan. This chemical is known for its foul odor. Since propane is odorless in its natural state, ethyl mercaptan is commonly used as an odorant for propane. Ethyl mercaptan is extremely flammable, so open flames, sparks, and heat must be avoided. It can irritate the skin, so be sure to use appropriate PPE to avoid contact. Even the everyday process of filling your tank with diesel fuel requires precautions. You need to be in attendance while fueling to ensure there are no accidental spills. Now that you have seen some of the hazardous materials you will work with, you know that you must take precautions to protect yourself. One way is through the use of PPE. When working with a hazardous chemical, whether or not it is propane, you must wear PPE to protect yourself. You must know what the chemical's hazards are and be trained so that you understand the purpose, limits, proper fit, and maintenance of each type of PPE. PPE requirements vary by chemical and by company. In propane handling operations, some type of flame-resistant clothing may be required. This could be coveralls or a jacket and pants, depending on your company's policy. Hand protection suitable for handling propane is required. Understand your company's policy. A hard hat and safety shoes may also be required. Depending on the task you are going to perform, face and eye protection may be required. High visibility clothing may also be necessary. Whatever the requirements are for your company, it is important to follow those rules and wear PPE. Propane and other hazardous chemicals can cause severe injury. Don't take shortcuts. Care for PPE properly. Before you use it, take the time to inspect it to make sure it is not damaged. Look for holes, cracks, wear, and other signs that might indicate your PPE should be replaced. If your PPE becomes damaged, check with your supervisor about disposing of and replacing it. Damaged PPE will not perform its job, which is to protect you.
It's important that you take your time. Don't be in a hurry. When you start doing things in a hurry, you start making mistakes. So you need to take your time, follow the proper procedures, put on your personal protection equipment. That's important for your safety, and follow proper procedures. Try and get into the habit of doing the same routine over and over again, and think about what you're doing.
Typically, propane is odorized prior to transportation in accordance with federal regulations. However, there are exceptions, and on occasion you may be required to transport non-odorized propane. Depending on the terminal, the addition of odorant can be automated or manual. In order to meet the requirements of the federal regulations, it is customary for the loading terminal to inject a minimum of 1 pound of the odorant ethyl mercaptan for every 10,000 gallons of propane. If odorants other than ethyl mercaptan are used, the amount of odorant added may be different, subject to applicable regulations. It is critical that transport operators verify the presence of odorant when they load propane from a terminal. Even if the odorant is automatically added, you still need to initial paperwork indicating that you recognize odorant was injected. Keep this paperwork with you while transporting the load. When odorant must be manually verified, the sniff test is the most widely used method. This test is normally completed before the propane is unloaded at the bulk plant. Always take the following precautions when performing the sniff test. Protect yourself by wearing appropriate PPE. The sniff test is done by opening one of the fixed liquid level gauge valves. Follow these steps. Only vent a small amount of propane. Sniff only after the vent is closed and the propane has vaporized. Verify that the propane is odorized. If you can smell propane odorant, proceed with unloading your transport. If you cannot smell propane odorant, or if you smell anything unusual, do not unload the transport. Contact your supervisor immediately for instructions. After you verify the presence of odorant, sign and date the bill of lading or other required paperwork and proceed with unloading your transport.
Sniff tests, we usually just crack one of the spitter valves. It's pretty simple. That way you know you definitely got the odor, even though with most of the terminals anymore, it's really pretty tough to get out of the terminal without it, with all the safety systems they have. But we have some places we go, they're running multi-products through the same pipeline. So you get some of these places where they're running multi-products, you'll be able to smell it. You can definitely tell the difference in the products.
Situations where the use of non-odorized or unodorized propane may be required. A transport filled with non-odorized propane requires a legible marking on two opposing sides that indicates non-odorized or not odorized. Handling hazardous materials is a part of your everyday duties as a transport operator. Make sure that you become familiar with the chemicals you work with and the hazards they present. Follow appropriate safety practices. Don't take shortcuts. And always, always wear PPE when performing your job.
The liquid's about minus 44, it's 40-something below zero. So if you actually get it on you, at first you won't feel nothing, but once it starts thawing out, it does hurt. I've had a couple minor burns, nothing major. And the ones I've had are a bit more, where I just got a little splatter, and it was about like having a severe sunburn.
It's important because it is a hazardous, flammable product. You're hauling large quantities of it, and so it's important that you think and be aware of surroundings, and and be aware of what you're handling, because it is a dangerous product.